No organization is immune to fraud, and nonprofits are no exception to the rule. They're typically smaller, they have less funding, so they're unable to get the number of people that they need to be able to segregate duties properly. Not to mention, in today's time, the economy is not so good, so people do some crazy things. So I think there's a lot of simple controls that you can do. Some of the things that we always recommend to our nonprofit clients are sending a bank statement directly to the executive director or someone outside of the accounting function.
Right.
Also for credit cards, limiting the amount of corporate cards that are issued in the organization. And as well, if the executive director or management people have a corporate card, making sure that those statements get sent to someone on the board, just so that there is some checks and balances there to be able to eyeball those things and make sure that there's no fraud going on. Recently, we discovered occurrence of fraud in one of our nonprofits where the executive director was abusing the credit card, the corporate credit card. He started off small, started charging some airfare and some lodging for personal trips, and then went as far as to purchase some furniture for his house. As typical, started off small, grew to a larger occurrence, and we believe that most of that could have been avoided if the board had taken a more active role and really looked into reviewing the personal expenditures, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So what have you come across in your
Well,
office?
unfortunately, I think it's a common misconception that people don't think that anyone will steal from a not-for-profit organization, but we have seen some similar cases as you have, and one in particular is in the area of payroll. And we had a not-for-profit where the controller, although they didn't have any responsibility for payroll, they did have the ability to add employees to their payroll journal. And so the controller had added a couple of ghost employees. What happened was he assigned them employee numbers that were outside the range of their normal employee numbers. So when the payroll department ran their payroll report, those employees didn't show up on the report. The supervisor approved the payroll report, and then the controller added those employees in when it came time to print how much cash needed to be moved from their cash account to the direct deposits. And so, again, there were things that could have been done to prevent that, and sometimes they're simple things. If somebody had just looked at the direct deposit report, they would have noticed that there were 4 payroll checks that were all going to the same checking account. And another thing is if somebody had just compared the payroll report to the amount of cash that was being withdrawn from their account, they would have noticed that the two amounts didn't agree. So there definitely are controls that can be put into place, and I think one of the most important ones would be segregation of duties. It's difficult in some smaller not-for-profits, but I think if you get the executive director involved in some things, and definitely you have to get your board of directors involved in helping you with some of those. With the not-for-profit, as we know, the board is ultimately responsible for that organization. So it's important that the board gets involved, and I think it's very important to have a CPA on your board of directors so that they understand the financial statements and they can help review those and look for anything that may stand out as a red flag.
Right, yeah, involvement is the biggest thing, and there needs to be training for the board so that they know what they need to be looking for, what their responsibilities are. I mean, they are the fiduciary for the organization, and they do have a higher level of responsibility. We always recommend having a finance committee or an audit committee. That way they can really look into the fraud risks. They can identify those things, and that's the best way to prevent fraud, is identifying those fraud risks and establishing those controls that will prevent it.